The city wore winter like a funeral shroud. Chicago at 11:17 on a Tuesday night, the kind of cold that turned breath into ghosts and made even the streetlights seem to shiver. James Morgan sat behind the wheel of his Porsche, hands gripping leather that cost more than most people earned in a month, and felt absolutely nothing. The meeting had been a disaster. $50 million gone. The investor had smiled, shook his hand, and walked away. Just like that. 8 months of work, of presentations, of promises, reduced to a polite rejection and the sound of expensive shoes on marble floors. James reached for the bottle on the passenger seat. Whiskey. The good kind. The kind that costs $300 and tasted like regret. He unscrewed the cap but didn't drink. Not yet. First, he had to get home. To his penthouse. To his empire of glass and steel and profound, suffocating emptiness. The light turned red. He stopped. And that's when he saw it. A splash of color against the gray. Something pink, small, impossibly fragile, lying beside a dumpster in an abandoned industrial lot, half buried in snow that had turned the color of old bones. James blinked. The whiskey bottle slipped from his fingers. Forgotten. It was a child. His brain refused to process it at first. Children didn't lie in the snow at midnight in Southside Chicago. Children were home. Safe. Warm. Loved. Children were not crumpled beside garbage like something discarded. Like something broken beyond repair. But this one was. James didn't remember getting out of the car. Didn't remember running. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. But he barely noticed. All he could see was the small form, the pink dress now gray with frost, the tiny hands curled into fists, the lips that had turned the color of deep water. He dropped to his knees beside her. The snow soaked through his $3,000 suit pants. He didn't care. Open your eyes, little one, please. The words came out broken, desperate. His hands, shaking now, reached for the child. She was so small, 6, maybe 7 years old. Her skin was ice. Her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps that barely moved her chest. Hypothermia. Severe hypothermia. James had read about it once in some article he'd scrolled past without really caring. Now the words came back to him with terrible clarity. Core temperature dropping. Organs shutting down. The body giving up, one system at a time. He tore off his coat. Cashmere. Custom tailored. $3,000 at least. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting this child warm. He wrapped it around her small body, pulling her against his chest, trying to share heat that suddenly felt inadequate, meaningless. Her whole body convulsed. A seizure. Her limbs jerked with terrible mechanical precision, like a puppet with tangled strings. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites. A sound escaped her throat, something between a moan and a scream, and James felt his heart stop. No, 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 no. His phone. Where was his phone? His hands fumbled in his pocket, nearly dropping it twice before he managed to dial. 911, the numbers he'd never had to call in his entire privileged life. There's a little girl. The words tumbled out, barely coherent. She's freezing. She's having some kind of seizure. Please hurry. Please. The operator's voice was calm, professional, utterly surreal. Sir, stay with her. Keep her warm. Wrap her in something thick. Do not shake her. James pressed the child closer, feeling her small body rigid against his chest. Her convulsions began to slow. For a moment, he felt relief. Then he realized why. She was going still. Too still. Come on, sweetheart. His voice cracked. Breathe, you hear me? Just breathe. Her chest rose, fell, rose again, barely. She was fighting. This tiny creature, abandoned in the snow, was fighting for every breath. James had built an empire. He'd conquered markets, destroyed competitors, accumulated wealth that most people couldn't even conceptualize. He'd thought himself powerful, invincible. But kneeling in the snow, holding this dying child, he understood for the first time in his life what powerlessness truly felt like. The siren started as a distant wail, weaving through the industrial wasteland like a promise. James had never been religious, had never prayed, but he found himself whispering words to a God he didn't believe in. bargaining with the universe for something he had no right to ask. Red lights cut through the snow, harsh and beautiful. The ambulance slid to a stop, and suddenly there were people, professionals, moving with swift efficiency that made James feel clumsy and useless. "Sir, step back. We've got her." But James couldn't let go. His arms had locked around the child, as if his body understood what his mind refused to accept, that releasing her meant accepting he might never see her breathe again. "Sir," the paramedic's hand on his shoulder, firm but not unkind, "you saved her life. Now let us finish the job." James released her, watched as they laid her on the stretcher, wrapping her in silver thermal blankets that caught the ambulance lights, and turned her into something alien, something precious. Watched as they attached monitors, inserted an IV, covered her face with an oxygen mask. Weak pulse, 89 degrees, possible shock. The medical jargon washed over him. He understood maybe one word in three. It didn't matter. What mattered was the small chest still rising and falling beneath all that silver, still fighting. "Sir," the paramedic again, this time meeting his eyes. "You coming with us?" James looked at his Porsche, door still open, engine still running, whiskey bottle probably rolling around on the floor. Looked at the child disappearing into the back of the ambulance. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. He climbed in. The ambulance interior was cramped, hot, smelling of antiseptic and coffee and fear. James sat on the small bench, watching the paramedics work, feeling more out of place than he ever had in his life. This wasn't his world. Boardrooms were his world. Negotiations, power lunches, not this. This desperate scramble to keep a small heart beating. "What's her name?" the paramedic asked, not looking up from the monitor. "I don't know." James's voice sounded strange to his own ears. Hollow. "I just found her." The paramedic glanced at him, a quick assessment, then nodded. "Check her pockets. Sometimes they carry ID." James hesitated. It felt wrong, invasive, going through the child's clothing. But the paramedic was right. Someone somewhere was missing this little girl. Someone needed to know she was found. He reached carefully into the pocket of her dress. The fabric was thin, cheap, worn soft with age and washing. His fingers touched something. Paper. He pulled it out carefully. A small note, folded multiple times, the edges soft from handling. The ink had run slightly from the snow, but the words were still legible. James unfolded it with hands that had started to shake again. "My name is Lily. My mommy is Claire Bennett. If someone finds me, please take me to Memorial Hospital. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." The handwriting was a child's, careful and shaky. The paper was lined notebook paper, torn from a spiral binding. And at the bottom, a small drawing. A flower. Or maybe a star. It was hard to tell. But it was the name that made the world tilt sideways. Claire Bennett. James stared at the paper, read the name again. Again. Surely he was mistaken. Surely it couldn't be the same Claire. Chicago had, what, 3 million people? Claire was a common name. Bennett wasn't unusual. But even as he told himself this, he knew. Somehow he knew. The ambulance lurched around a corner, sirens wailing. James gripped the edge of the bench, the note clutched in his other hand, and felt the careful architecture of his life. The walls he'd built so meticulously over 8 years begin to crack. Claire. He hadn't spoken that name aloud since the day he'd sent the text message. The day he'd chosen his father's company over the only person who'd ever made him feel human. The day he'd proven his father right. That sentiment was weakness. That love was a luxury successful men couldn't afford. Claire, who'd painted in a tiny studio that smelled of turpentine and possibility. Claire, who'd laughed at his pretensions, who'd seen through his armor to the frightened boy underneath. Claire, who'd told him he had the eyes of someone running from himself. She'd been right. And he'd run so far, built his walls so high, that he'd convinced himself he'd escaped, that he'd won. Looking at this child, this Lily, fighting for her life under silver blankets, James understood with sudden, devastating clarity that he hadn't won anything. He'd just been hiding, accumulating wealth like armor, surrounding himself with expensive things that meant nothing, that felt nothing, that asked nothing of him except the one thing he'd been taught to give: money. The ambulance doors burst open, cold air rushed in. James followed as they wheeled Lily into the emergency room, a chaos of fluorescent lights and hurrying people and the smell of blood and fear. "Sir," a nurse stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You can't come back here. Family only." "I'm the one who found her," James said, and heard the desperation in his own voice. "Please, I need to make sure she's okay." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "The waiting room is through there. We'll update you as soon as we can." "But there was someone," James persisted, holding up the note. "Her mother, Claire Bennett. Is she here?" "The note says to bring Lily to memorial. That has to mean something." The nurse took the note, read it quickly. Her face changed. "Let me check something. Wait here." She disappeared through the double doors. James stood in the hallway, surrounded by people but utterly alone, holding his expensive coat that now smelled of smoke and snow and a child's fear. The seconds stretched. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, and somewhere a machine beeped. Somewhere else, someone cried. The fluorescent lights hummed a note that made his teeth ache. The nurse returned. Her face was carefully neutral, which told James everything he needed to know even before she spoke. "There is a Claire Bennett here. She was admitted 3 weeks ago. She's in the ICU. 3rd floor, room 314. 3 weeks." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "What happened to her?" James heard himself ask. "I can't give out patient information to non-family members." The nurse's voice was kind but firm. "But sir, if you know her, if you can help us contact her family, that would be very helpful." James nodded slowly. His feet were already moving toward the elevator. He didn't remember telling them to, didn't remember deciding. His body seemed to have made the choice his mind was still struggling to process. 3rd floor, room 314. The elevator ride lasted forever and no time at all. James watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3. The doors opened with a soft chime that sounded obscene in its cheerfulness. The ICU was quieter than the emergency room. The lights were dimmer here, the sounds muffled. James walked down the corridor, past closed doors and darkened windows, past machines that measured heartbeats and breath in the slim margin between life and death. Room 314. He stopped outside the door. Through the narrow window, he could see a shape on the bed. Small, still. He couldn't make out features from here, but he didn't need to. He knew it was her. James had faced down hostile takeovers. He'd stared down board members trying to vote him out. He'd built a company from near bankruptcy to billion-dollar valuations. But he couldn't make himself open this door. His hand was on the handle when the door opened from the inside. A doctor emerged, nearly colliding with him. "Oh, excuse me, can I help you? I'm here to see Claire Bennett." The words came out steady, which surprised him. "I'm the one who found her daughter." "Lily." The doctor's expression changed. "Ah, yes, come in. I'm Dr. Patel." James followed him into the room and stopped. She was so still. That was the first thing he noticed. Claire, who'd never been still in her life, who'd moved through the world like water, was motionless. Tubes ran from her arms. A ventilator covered her mouth. Monitors beeped softly, measuring vitals that seemed too slow, too faint. But it was her. Even with the bruises, even with the pallor, even with the terrible stillness, it was unmistakably Claire. Her dark hair, longer than he remembered, spread across the pillow. Her hands, those hands that had created beauty from nothing, lay motionless on the white sheets. One wrist was in a cast. Her face, her beautiful face, bore the shadow of violence. A bruise along her cheekbone, another near her temple. James felt something break inside his chest. Something that had been holding back an ocean. What happened? His voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Patel consulted his tablet, but James suspected he knew the information by heart already. Traumatic brain injury. She fell down the stairs in her home. Or she was pushed. The police are investigating. She's been in a coma for 22 days. A coma. 22 days. James did the math automatically. 3 weeks. 3 weeks that Lily had been without her mother. 3 weeks that this woman, this person he'd loved more than his own survival, had been trapped in this bed, surrounded by machines, while her daughter faced God knew what at home. "Her vitals are good," Dr. Patel continued. "Brain activity is normal. We're hopeful she'll wake up, but we can't predict when. Could be tomorrow. Could be months. And Lily, James heard himself ask, the little girl, will she be okay? Too early to tell. She's severely hypothermic, but you got to her in time. That matters. Dr. Patel paused, studying James with open curiosity. How do you know them? Claire Bennett and her daughter? James opened his mouth to answer, closed it. How did you explain 8 years in a single sentence? How did you compress the story of the biggest mistake of your life into words that a stranger could understand? We were friends, he finally said, a long time ago. Dr. Patel nodded, asked no more questions. He checked Claire's monitors one more time, made a note on his tablet, and left James alone with the woman who'd once known him better than he knew himself. James stood by the bed. He didn't touch her. Didn't feel he had the right. He'd given up that right 8 years ago when he'd chosen fear over love, safety over risk, when he'd proved his father's cynical worldview correct. Instead, he just looked at her, memorized her face all over again, noticed the small things that had changed, the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the silver thread in her hair near her left temple, the calluses on her fingers that spoke of work, of struggle, of years he knew nothing about. Claire. The name felt strange on his tongue after so long. Claire, it's me. It's James. No response. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor, the soft hiss of the ventilator. I found Lily. She's downstairs. She's going to be okay. You saved her, Claire. Somehow, even while you were here, you saved her. You saved. She had your note. She followed your instructions. She's so brave. Just like you. His voice cracked. He stopped, swallowed hard, continued. I'm so sorry. For everything, for leaving, for being a coward, for wasting 8 years because I was afraid, because I let my father's voice in my head tell me that people like us, that we don't end up happy, that success and love are mutually exclusive. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. Claire's eyelids flickered, just slightly, maybe a reflex, maybe nothing. But James leaned forward, hope flaring painful and bright in his chest. Can you hear me? Please, if you can hear me, come back. Your daughter needs you. Lily needs you. He waited, watched. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The ventilator hissed. Nothing changed. James pulled up the chair and sat down heavily. He'd been running on adrenaline for the past hour. Now, suddenly, he felt every second of the day. The failed meeting, the bottle of whiskey, the moment of finding Lily, the ambulance ride, this room, this woman, this impossible, devastating reunion. He put his head in his hands. When he was younger, much younger, before the money and the success and the carefully constructed walls, James had believed in signs, in fate, in the idea that the universe bent toward meaning, that coincidences were actually moments of profound significance dressed in ordinary clothes. Then his father died, leaving behind an empire and a challenge. Make something of yourself, or prove you're as weak as I always suspected. And James had made something of himself. He'd succeeded. He'd won. But winning had felt a lot like losing. And now this, finding Claire's daughter by pure chance in the snow, on the one night when James had taken the route he never took, at the one moment when stopping might make all the difference. If that wasn't fate, what was? Or maybe, a cynical voice whispered, maybe it was just random cruelty. The universe's way of showing him everything he'd lost, everything he'd thrown away, and making sure he understood that some mistakes were too big to fix. A soft knock on the door made James look up. A nurse entered, carrying a clipboard. Sir, are you family? No, James stood up. I'm just a friend. I'm sorry, but visiting hours are over for non-family members. You'll need to leave. James looked at Claire, at the monitors, at the woman who'd once meant everything and who he'd reduced to a text message, a memory, a regret he drank away in expensive whiskey. I understand. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Can someone call me if anything changes? The nurse looked uncertain. We can only share medical information with family. I found her daughter, James said quietly. Lily, she's downstairs. I'm the reason the little girl's alive. Please. Something in his voice must have reached her. The nurse's expression softened. She pulled out a card, handed it to him. This is my direct line. I'll call you, but I can't promise anything official. Thank you. James took the card, memorized the number even though he knew he'd never lose it. He looked at Claire one more time. I'll check on Lily. I'll make sure she's okay, and I'll come back tomorrow. I promise. As he left the room, he heard the soft beep of monitors, the hiss of the ventilator, the sound of a life suspended between two possibilities. Wake up or don't. Survive or slip away. The universe holding its breath, waiting to see which way the coin would fall. James took the elevator back down to the emergency room. His legs felt weak. When had he last eaten? He couldn't remember. The day had become a blur of disasters, each one bigger than the last, culminating in this, the discovery that the woman he'd loved, the woman he'd abandoned, had been lying in a coma while her daughter fought to survive. The pediatric ward was on the second floor. James found it by following the signs, moving through corridors that all looked the same, past people whose lives were falling apart in ways he couldn't begin to understand. Lily was in room 212. Through the window, he could see her small form on the bed, dwarfed by blankets and machines. A nurse sat beside her, checking monitors. James knocked softly. The nurse looked up, smiled, came to the door. You're the man who found her? Yes, you saved her life. The nurse's smile widened. Her temperature's up to 93 degrees. She's responding well. We think she's going to be fine. James felt his knees nearly give out. Fine. The word seemed impossibly large, impossibly generous. Fine meant alive. Fine meant breathing. Fine meant this tiny creature, this Lily, would have a chance at all the things she deserved. Can I see her? Just for a minute. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. She's sedated. But yes. 1 minute. James entered the room. Up close, Lily looked even smaller. Her face was pale, her lips still slightly blue despite the warming blankets. Dark hair spread across the pillow. Her small hands lay motionless on top of the covers. But she was alive. Her chest rose and fell with steady, even breaths. The monitor showed numbers that, even to James's untrained eye, looked better, stronger. He pulled up a chair and sat down, studied the child who was Claire's daughter, who had Claire's bone structure, Claire's delicate features, and something else, something that made James's breath catch. Her eyes were closed, but James could see the shape of them, the set of them in her face, and when the nurse adjusted the blankets, revealing more of Lily's face, James saw it clearly. The resemblance wasn't to Claire, it was to him. The same high cheekbones, the same straight nose, the same slightly pointed chin. It was like looking at his own childhood photos, feminized and softened, but unmistakable. James sat very still. His mind raced, doing calculations he didn't want to do. Lily was 6, maybe 7. That would put her birth at 2017 or 2018. 9 months before that would be late 2016, early 2017. Exactly when James had been with Claire. Exactly when he'd sent that text message and walked away. No. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. The nurse looked up in concern. Sir, are you okay? James didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He walked out of the room, down the corridor, kept walking until he found a bathroom, locked himself in a stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and put his head between his knees, trying to breathe, trying to think. It couldn't be. Claire would have told him, would have called, messaged, found some way to let him know he was going to be a father. She wouldn't have kept that from him. Except he'd made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with her. He'd ended things by text message. The ultimate coward's move. And then he'd blocked her number, deleted her contact information, erased her from his life with the thoroughness of someone afraid of changing his mind. What if she'd tried to reach him? What if she'd attempted to tell him and he'd been unreachable, unavailable, gone? What if he had a daughter and he'd spent 6 years not knowing she existed? James made a sound that was something between a laugh and a sob. The bathroom acoustics made it echo, hollow, and bitter. He sat there for a long time. Eventually, his breathing steadied. His hands stopped shaking. He stood up, washed his face in the sink, looked at himself in the mirror. He looked old. When had that happened? When had the lines appeared around his eyes, the gray at his temples? He was 38, successful beyond measure. and he looked like a man who'd lived twice as long and enjoyed it half as much. James left the bathroom, walked back to the pediatric ward. Lily was still sleeping, peaceful now, color returning to her small face. He stood outside her door for a long time, just watching. Then he pulled out his phone, sent a text to his assistant. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. All meetings, everything. Tell them it's a family emergency. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Family. The word felt strange. James had no family. His mother had died when he was young. His father had passed 8 years ago. He had no siblings, no relatives he spoke to. He'd convinced himself that solitude was strength, that needing no one was power. But looking at this child, this Lily, who might be his daughter, who was fighting her way back from the edge of death, James understood what he'd actually been. Not strong, not powerful, just alone. He pulled out the note again. Read it one more time. My name is Lily. My mommy is Claire Bennett. If someone finds me, please take me to Memorial Hospital. Such simple words, such profound trust. Lily had believed that someone would find her, that someone would help, that the world, despite all evidence to the contrary, contained more kindness than cruelty. And she'd been right. James folded the note carefully, put it in his wallet. He would keep it forever, as a reminder of the night his life had split into before and after, the night he'd stopped running, even if he didn't know it yet. A social worker appeared, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a tired smile. She introduced herself as Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Morgan, I understand you're the one who found Lily Bennett. Yes, I need to talk to you about what happens next. Can we go somewhere quiet? They found a small conference room. Sarah pulled out paperwork, arranged it on the table with the ease of someone who'd done this too many times. Lily will be in our care for the next 48 hours while we try to locate family members. Her mother is in the ICU, unable to care for her. Her father, David Carter, is currently being held on domestic violence charges. We're working with the police to piece together what happened. David Carter. The name meant nothing to James, but he memorized it anyway, committed it to memory along with everything else he needed to know, needed to understand. What happens if you can't find anyone? James asked. Then Lily will be placed in foster care until her mother recovers. Sarah's expression was professionally neutral, but James could read the subtext. If her mother recovers. I want to help, James heard himself say. Financially, whatever she needs. Sarah smiled, the expression sad and knowing. That's very generous, Mr. Morgan. But this isn't really about money. Lily needs stability, safety, family. Family. There was that word again. James nodded, understood. Please keep me informed. He handed her his card, the one with his personal number. Whatever she needs, day or night. Sarah took the card, studied it with open curiosity. CEO of Morgan Technologies. She looked up at him. How do you know them, Claire Bennett and her daughter? We were friends, James said again. It was getting easier to say. A long time ago. Sarah nodded, asked no more questions. She gathered her paperwork, shook his hand. You did a good thing tonight, Mr. Morgan. You saved that little girl's life. After she left, James sat in the conference room alone. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere, a phone rang. The hospital moved around him, full of life and death and the infinite gradations between. He thought about Claire lying 3 floors above him, trapped in whatever darkness coma brought. He thought about Lily fighting her way back to warmth and life. He thought about David Carter, whoever he was, whatever he'd done to put both of them in this hospital. And he thought about himself, about the man who'd spent 8 years building walls and calling it success, who'd convinced himself that isolation was freedom, that needing no one made him strong. He'd been wrong about so many things. James stood up, left the conference room, took the elevator back up to the 3rd floor, room 314. The nurse from earlier saw him approaching, raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him. James nodded his thanks, pushed open the door. Claire lay exactly as before, still, silent. The machines keeping faithful count of her heartbeat, her breath, her fragile hold on life. James pulled the chair close to the bed, sat down. This time slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. It was warm. Somehow he'd expected it to be cold. But it was warm, alive, real. I found her, he said quietly. I found Lily. She's safe. She's going to be okay. Claire's fingers twitched slightly in his grasp. Another reflex, probably. But James held on anyway. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if any part of you knows I'm here. But I need to say this. I'm sorry, Claire, for everything. For leaving. For being a coward. For making you face 8 years alone because I was too afraid to face one day with you. He paused, swallowed hard. I think, he continued, I think Lily might be mine. I saw her face. She has my eyes, Claire. My cheekbones. I don't know for sure. Maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. Maybe I'm just desperately hoping that some part of you is still connected to me. But if she is, if she's my daughter, then I've wasted 6 years. 6 years I could have known her, loved her, protected her. His voice broke. He stopped, gathered himself, continued. Wake up, Claire. Please, your daughter needs you. I need you to wake up and tell me I'm wrong, that I'm imagining things, that Lily isn't mine. Or tell me I'm right and yell at me for being absent and help me figure out how to be a father to this brave, beautiful little girl who followed your instructions and saved her own life. No response. Just the beep of monitors, the hiss of the ventilator, the sound of life continuing, whether you were conscious to experience it or not. James sat with her until the night shift nurse gently told him he had to leave. Until the hospital grew quiet, the corridors emptying, the lights dimming, until the world narrowed to this room, this woman, this moment of profound uncertainty. When he finally left, when he drove his Porsche back through streets that had been transformed by snow into something clean and new, when he rode the elevator up to his penthouse that suddenly felt like a mausoleum, James Morgan understood that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. He'd spent 8 years running from the biggest mistake of his life. Tonight he'd stopped running. Tonight he'd found what he'd been running from, and God help him, he didn't know if that was salvation or damnation or something too complicated for words. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't leaving again. Not this time. Never again. James didn't sleep. He tried. Lay in his king-size bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows move across expensive plaster, and found that rest was impossible. His mind kept circling back to that hospital room, to Claire's motionless form, to Lily's small face that might impossibly be his own face reflected back at him through genetics and time. At 5 in the morning, he gave up, showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, clothes so casual his assistant would have been shocked. Made coffee he didn't drink. Stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse and watched the city wake up below him. 3 million people starting their days, none of them knowing that his entire world had shifted on its axis in the span of a single night. His phone buzzed, a text from the nurse, the one who'd promised to update him. Brief, professional, but somehow kind. Lily awake, stable, asking for mother. James was in his car before he consciously decided to move. The drive to Memorial took 20 minutes. He spent them rehearsing things to say, explanations that made sense, words that could possibly convey the complexity of what he felt. By the time he reached the hospital parking lot, he'd abandoned them all. There were no right words for this. The pediatric ward was quieter in the morning, softer somehow. Sunlight streamed through windows, making the sterile corridors almost cheerful. James found room 212, knocked softly. The nurse from the night before, whose name tag read Jennifer, opened the door. Her expression brightened when she saw him. She's been asking for her mother, Jennifer said quietly. I told her Mommy is resting upstairs. I didn't know what else to say. Is she okay? To talk, I mean? Physically, yes. Emotionally, Jennifer paused, chose her words carefully. She's 6 years old and she's been through something no child should experience. Be gentle. James nodded, stepped into the room. Lily was sitting up in bed, small and fragile against a mountain of pillows. Someone had brushed her hair. Someone had found her a hospital gown with cartoon characters on it. She looked impossibly young, impossibly vulnerable, and when she turned her head and saw James, her eyes, those eyes that might be his own, widened. They were gray-blue, distinctive, unusual, exactly like his. You're the man from last night, Lily said. Her voice was soft, uncertain. You found me in the snow, yes. James approached slowly, careful not to startle her. I'm James. How are you feeling? Cold. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself. Even though it's warm in here, I still feel cold. Is that normal? I think so. Your body went through something scary. It needs time to remember how to be warm again. Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Okay. Then she looked at him directly, and James felt his breath catch. Where's my mommy? The nurse said she's resting, but I need to see her. I need to tell her I'm sorry. Sorry? James pulled the chair close to the bed, sat down. Why would you need to apologize? Because I ran away. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Mommy always said never go outside alone at night. Never. But I was scared and I couldn't think what else to do, and I thought if I could just find help, if someone could come back and save Mommy, then it would be okay. But now she's resting and the nurse won't tell me when I can see her, and I think her voice broke. I think maybe I did something really bad. James felt something crack in his chest. This child, this brave, terrified child, had saved her own life, and she thought she'd done something wrong. Lily, he kept his voice steady, gentle. You didn't do anything bad. You did exactly the right thing. You were so brave. Your mommy would be so proud of you. Are you sure? The tears spilled over, running down her small face. Because I left her there, with him, and she was bleeding and I just ran and ran. Who's him, Lily? Lily's face changed, closed. She looked away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on her blanket. Daddy David, she whispered. But I'm not supposed to talk about it. He said if I ever told anyone if I was bad and talked about family business, then something terrible would happen. James felt ice in his veins. Carefully, so carefully, he reached out and took Lily's small hand in his. She didn't pull away. Lily, look at me. She did, reluctantly. Daddy David can't hurt you anymore. You're safe here, and your mommy is safe too. She's upstairs, and the doctors are taking very good care of her. Can I see her? Please, I promise I'll be quiet. I won't wake her up if she's sleeping. Soon, James squeezed her hand gently. She needs to rest a little more. But I promise, as soon as the doctors say it's okay, you'll see her. Lily nodded, seemed to accept this. Then she surprised him by asking, Are you a doctor? No, I'm just someone who was driving by at the right time. Mommy says there's no such thing as coincidence. That angels sometimes disguise themselves as regular people so we won't be scared of them. James felt his throat tighten. Your mommy sounds very wise. She is. Lily's expression softened, became almost dreamy. She's the wisest person in the whole world. She can paint pictures that look like they're moving, and she makes the best pancakes. And when I have bad dreams, she sits with me until I fall asleep again, even when she's really tired from working. She works a lot, 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Lily counted on her small fingers. She teaches art at the community center 3 days a week, and she cleans offices at night. And sometimes on weekends, she paints portraits at the farmer's market. 3 jobs. James thought of his penthouse, his Porsche, his wealth that he'd never questioned. Thought of Claire working herself to exhaustion, raising a daughter alone, while he'd been, what, making money, attending galas, congratulating himself on his success? She sounds amazing, he said quietly. She is. Lily yawned, fighting against obvious exhaustion. Uncle James? Yes. Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep? I don't like being alone. Uncle James. The title felt simultaneously wrong and completely right. Of course, I'll stay as long as you need. Lily's eyes were already closing. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing evening out, her small hand still holding his. James sat very still, studied this child who was half Claire, who might be half him, memorized the shape of her nose, the curve of her cheek, the dark eyelashes resting against pale skin. If she was his daughter, he'd missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school. 6 years of memories he could never recover, never reclaim. And whose fault was that? Jennifer came in quietly, checked monitors, adjusted blankets. She gave James a kind smile. You're good with her. I'm winging it. Aren't we all? Jennifer made a note on her chart. She's responding well. We'll probably discharge her in 2 days if she continues to improve. Do you know if she has other family? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles? I don't know. James realized how little he knew about Claire's life, the 8 years he'd missed. I'm trying to find out. Social services will be here this afternoon. They'll need to place her somewhere safe until her mother recovers. Can't she stay with me? Jennifer gave him a long, assessing look. Are you family? No, the word felt like admission of failure. But I knew her mother years ago. We were close. How close? Close enough that I think I might be Lily's father. The words hung in the air between them. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Understanding. Sympathy. Something else he couldn't quite read. Then you need to talk to social services. And probably a lawyer, and definitely get a DNA test. But until all that's sorted out, Jennifer's voice gentled, you're just a concerned friend. That's all the system can see you as right now. James nodded, understood the reality she was laying out, understood that wanting to help, even believing he might be Lily's father, didn't give him any legal standing. Not yet. Can I stay with her until social services arrives? Yes. Jennifer moved toward the door, paused. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Whatever your relationship to them is, you showed up. That matters more than you might think. After she left, James sat in the quiet room, listening to Lily breathe, and pulled out his phone. Called his lawyer, Catherine Walsh, who answered on the second ring despite the early hour. Catherine, I need your help. He explained everything. The night before, finding Lily. Claire in a coma. The resemblance he couldn't ignore. The need to protect a child who might be his daughter, but who the system would see as a stranger. Catherine listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. James, her voice was careful, professional. Are you sure about this? Because once you start this process, once you claim paternity, there's no going back. Your life will change in ways you can't predict. It already has. Okay. Then here's what we do. First, DNA test. We need confirmation. Second, I'll file for emergency guardianship, but understand that without proof of paternity, it's a long shot. Third, we investigate this David Carter. If he's been abusive, if there's documented evidence, we can use that to keep Lily away from him. He's in jail. Domestic violence charges. Good. That helps. Catherine paused. James, I have to ask. If the DNA test comes back negative, if Lily isn't yours, are you still going to do this? Still going to fight for guardianship? James looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed. Thought about Claire upstairs, fighting her way back from darkness. Thought about the 8 years he'd wasted running from the best thing that ever happened to him. Yes, because even if she's not mine biologically, she's Claire's, and that's enough. All right then, I'll get started. But James, be prepared. The system doesn't work as fast as we'd like, and David Carter has rights as the presumed father. This could get complicated. It already is complicated. Fair enough. I'll call you this afternoon with an update. James hung up, put his phone away, reached out and carefully brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. The door opened. Sarah Mitchell, the social worker from the night before, entered with a clipboard and an expression that suggested she'd already had a long day despite it being barely 9 in the morning. Mr. Morgan, I hoped I'd find you here. She pulled up another chair, sat down. We need to talk about Lily's placement. I want her to stay with me. Sarah didn't look surprised. I got the call from your lawyer 20 minutes ago. She's very thorough. She's the best, I'm sure. Sarah looked at Lily, then back at James. But here's the reality. You're not family. You're not married to her mother. You have no legal relationship to this child. The court isn't going to place her with you based on, she checked her notes, a belief that you might be her biological father. Even with a DNA test takes time. And we need to place Lily somewhere safe today, not next week. Sarah's voice was kind but firm. I understand you want to help, but the system has rules for a reason. And what happens if she goes into foster care? James heard the edge in his own voice. She's just been through trauma. She needs stability, familiarity. I agree, which is why I'm here to ask if you know anyone else. Grandparents, family friends, anyone who might have an established relationship with Lily, James thought. Realized he knew nothing about Claire's family. Had never asked back when they were together. Had been too wrapped up in his own problems to think about hers. No, he admitted, I don't know. Sarah made a note. Then we'll place her in emergency foster care. I have a family who specializes in trauma cases. They're good people. Lily will be safe, but she'll be with strangers. James looked at Lily again. She's already lost so much. Her mother is in a coma. Her father, or the man she thinks is her father, hurt them both. And now you want to take away the one thing that's familiar? This hospital? Me? You're a stranger too, Mr. Morgan. Sarah's voice wasn't unkind, just factual. You met her 12 hours ago. She doesn't know you. She knows I saved her life, which is why she trusts you right now. But trust built on trauma isn't the same as trust built on relationship. Sarah stood up. I'm sorry, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I have to do what's best for Lily. And right now, that's placement with a licensed foster family. How long until her mother wakes up? Or until we establish legal guardianship, whichever comes first. And if David Carter gets out of jail? Sarah's expression hardened. He won't get near her. I promise you that. We have enough evidence of abuse that his parental rights are likely to be suspended. But these things take time. After Sarah left, James sat in angry, helpless silence. He'd built a company from nothing. He'd negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions. He'd convinced investors, swayed board members, won wars fought in conference rooms and stock tickers. But he couldn't protect one small girl who might be his daughter. The injustice of it burned. Lily woke up around noon, groggy at first, then increasingly alert. A nurse brought lunch, soup, and crackers that Lily picked at without enthusiasm. I'm not very hungry, she said quietly. That's okay. Your tummy needs time to wake up too. Uncle James, Lily put down her spoon. Are they going to make me leave? I heard people talking in the hallway about foster care. James wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that she could stay here where at least things were familiar. But something in her eyes, that same intelligence he'd seen in Claire, deserved honesty. Yes, just for a little while, until your mommy gets better. I don't want to go with strangers. I know. But they'll take good care of you, and I'll visit every single day. I promise. Lily studied him with those unsettling eyes. You're not just saying that? Adults sometimes promise things they don't really mean. Who told you that? Daddy David. He promised he'd stop getting angry. He promised he'd stop hurting mommy. She looked down at her hands. He didn't keep those promises. James felt rage so pure it made his vision narrow. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not let this child see the violence he was capable of feeling. I'm not Daddy David, and when I make a promise, I keep it. Okay, Lily's voice was small, but she met his eyes. Then I believe you. The foster family arrived at 3 in the afternoon. Mark and Ellen Reeves, a couple in their 50s who radiated competence and warmth in equal measure. They spent an hour with Lily, gentle and patient, letting her ask questions, showing her pictures of their home, their golden retriever named Biscuit, the room that would be hers with the window overlooking a garden. Lily was polite, reserved. She answered their questions but didn't smile. When it came time to leave, when Ellen helped her into a wheelchair even though she could walk just fine, Lily looked back at James with an expression that broke his heart. You promised, she said. I promised. I'll see you tomorrow. After they left, James stood in the empty room and felt the full weight of his powerlessness. He was a billionaire. He could buy anything, solve any problem that money could fix. But money couldn't bring Claire out of her coma, couldn't give him the years with Lily he'd missed, couldn't undo the damage David Carter had done to them both. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, room 314. The same nurse from yesterday was on duty. She smiled when she saw him. Becoming a regular, Mr. Morgan? Seems that way. She's the same. No change, but that's not necessarily bad. The brain heals in its own time. James nodded, went into the room, pulled the chair close to Claire's bed. She looked exactly as before. Still, peaceful, trapped somewhere between life and death, present and absent. James took her hand. It was warmer than yesterday. Or maybe he was just hoping it was. They took Lily to foster care. The words came out harder than he expected. I tried to stop them, tried to keep her here or take her home with me. But I'm nobody, Claire. The system doesn't care that I found her, that I saved her life, that I think he stopped, swallowed hard, that I'm probably her father. The monitors beep their steady rhythm. She has my eyes. You probably know that. Probably knew it from the moment she was born. Gray-blue. that weird color that nobody else in the world seems to have. She has my cheekbones too, my chin. It's like looking at a mirror of my own childhood, but better, softer, more beautiful. He paused, studied Claire's face. Did you try to tell me? When you found out you were pregnant? I blocked your number, changed my email, made myself completely unreachable because I was a coward who couldn't face the possibility that you might try to change my mind. If you tried to reach me, I never knew. I made sure I'd never know. His voice cracked. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. Sorry is what you say when you step on someone's toe, when you're late for dinner. There's no word for what I did, for choosing fear over love, for leaving you to raise our daughter alone, for wasting 8 years that we could have been a family. Claire's eyelids flickered, just slightly, the same reflex he'd seen before, or maybe, just maybe, something more. I'm going to make this right. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out. I'll get guardianship of Lily. I'll protect her from David Carter. And when you wake up, because you're going to wake up Claire, you have to wake up, we'll figure out everything else. How to be parents, how to be whatever we need to be for her. He sat there until evening, talking occasionally, mostly just sitting in silence. The nurse came in to check vitals. A doctor made his rounds, reviewed charts, said nothing had changed. At 8 o'clock, visiting hours ended. James left reluctantly, drove to his penthouse, and immediately felt the oppressive emptiness of it. All this space, all this expensive furniture and art and carefully curated emptiness. No one to share it with. No laughter, no life. He ordered takeout he didn't eat, tried to work, reviewing reports and emails that suddenly seemed meaningless. Who cared about quarterly earnings when Claire was in a coma and Lily was with strangers? Around 11, his phone rang. Catherine, I have news. Some good, some complicated. Tell me, I've filed for emergency guardianship. The hearing is in 5 days. In the meantime, I've arranged for a DNA test. You'll go to the hospital tomorrow. They'll do a cheek swab, results in 48 hours. And if it's positive, then we have grounds for paternity. But James, here's the complicated part. David Carter is listed as the father on Lily's birth certificate. Even if you are the biological father, he has presumptive rights. We'll need to prove he's unfit, which shouldn't be difficult given the assault charges, but it adds time to the process. How much time? Weeks, maybe months. The court moves slowly. Lily doesn't have months. She needs stability now, I know. Catherine's voice was sympathetic but pragmatic. But we work within the system or we don't work at all. In the meantime, I've also hired a private investigator to dig into David Carter's background. If there's anything there, anything we can use to expedite removing his parental rights, we'll find it. After hanging up, James stood at his windows and watched the city lights blur into abstract patterns. Somewhere out there, Lily was in a stranger's house, probably unable to sleep, definitely scared. Somewhere in a hospital bed, Claire was fighting battles he couldn't see or help with. And he was here, alone, powerless despite all his power. The next day followed a grim routine. Hospital in the morning, cheek swab for the DNA test, a process that took less than 5 minutes and felt monumentally significant. Then to the foster home, where Ellen Reeves welcomed him kindly and led him to the backyard where Lily was sitting on a swing, not swinging, just sitting. Uncle James. She saw him and her face lit up. You came, I promised. He spent 2 hours there, playing with Lily in the yard, reading stories, answering her endless questions about why the sky was blue and whether stars were really suns and if her mommy could hear her even when she was sleeping. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged him, a fierce, desperate hug that lasted longer than appropriate for a child who'd known him less than 2 days. Tomorrow, she asked? Tomorrow, and every day after that. Then to the hospital, sitting with Claire, talking to her about Lily, about his day, about everything and nothing. The nurses knew him now, smiled when he arrived, brought him coffee without asking. On the 3rd day, the DNA results came back. Catherine called. Her voice was carefully neutral. James, are you sitting down? Just tell me. The test is positive, 99.97% probability. Lily is your daughter. James sat down, stared at nothing. Let the words sink in. He had a daughter. This wasn't speculation anymore. Wasn't hope or fear or imagination. This was fact, scientific, undeniable. He had a daughter he'd never known about, a daughter he'd missed 6 years of raising, a daughter who'd grown up calling another man daddy while he'd been what? Making money? Attending board meetings? Congratulating himself on his success? James, Catherine's voice pulled him back. Are you there? I'm here. This is good news. This gives us standing. I'm amending our guardianship petition to include paternity. The hearing is in 2 days. 2 days. Then what? Then we hope the judge sees reason. But James, you need to be prepared. David Carter's lawyer is going to fight this. They'll argue that you're an absentee parent trying to swoop in, that Lily knows David as her father, that stability requires keeping her with the family she knows. The family she knows put her mother in a coma, which we will emphasize strongly. Catherine paused. How are you holding up? James looked around his empty penthouse. I don't know. That's honest, at least. Get some rest. The hearing is at 9 a.m. on Friday. I'll prep you the night before. James hung up, sat in silence. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and drove to the hospital. He went straight to Lily's foster home first. Ellen answered the door, surprised to see him. Is everything okay? I need to tell Lily something. It's important. Ellen studied him for a moment, then nodded. She's in her room, second door on the right. James climbed the stairs, knocked softly on Lily's door, heard her small voice say, come in. She was sitting on her bed, coloring in a book. When she saw him, she smiled. Her whole face transformed. Uncle James, I didn't think you'd come twice in one day. James sat on the edge of the bed, took a breath. Lily, I need to talk to you about something important. Okay. She put down her crayons, gave him her full attention. You know how you've been calling me Uncle James? Yes. Well, he paused, searching for the right words. I just found out that I'm not actually your uncle. I'm your father. Your real father. Lily stared at him. Her young face worked through confusion, disbelief, hope, fear, all flickering past in rapid succession. But, she said slowly, Daddy David is my father. No, David married your mother when she was pregnant with you. But he's not your biological father. I am. Lily's eyes filled with tears. So you're my daddy? My real daddy? Yes. Where were you? Her voice broke. Why weren't you there when Daddy David was hurting Mommy? Why didn't you come? James felt the question like a physical blow. Because I didn't know, your mother and I, we lost touch. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know you existed, and that's my fault, Lily. That's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again. Lily studied him with those eyes that were his own eyes. Then she asked, very quietly, do you promise? Because adults sometimes promise things they don't really mean. I promise, and I keep my promises. Lily thought about this. Then slowly she climbed into his lap and put her arms around his neck. Okay, Daddy, she whispered. I believe you. James held his daughter for the first time, really held her, knowing she was his, and felt something in his chest that had been broken for 8 years begin, very slowly, to heal. After leaving Lily's foster home, James drove to the hospital, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Room 314. Claire lay exactly as before, but James saw her differently now, not just as the woman he'd loved and lost, not just as the victim of violence, but as the mother of his child. The woman who'd raised Lily alone, who'd worked 3 jobs, who'd protected their daughter from David Carter for as long as she could. The woman who'd been braver than he could ever claim to be. James pulled the chair close, took her hand. I met our daughter today, really met her, knowing she was mine. He stopped, overcome. She's perfect, Claire, smart and brave and kind. Everything good about both of us, and none of the bad. He squeezed her hand gently. Wake up. Please, I know I don't deserve to ask. I know I gave up the right to ask for anything from you 8 years ago. But Lily needs you. She needs her mother. And his voice broke. I need to tell you I'm sorry, that I was wrong. That running away from you was the worst decision of my life, and I'd give anything, everything, to take it back. The monitors beeped. The ventilator hissed. Nothing changed. But James kept talking. Told her about the DNA test, about the guardianship hearing, about his plans to protect Lily from David Carter. about the life they could build, the three of them, if she'd just come back, if she'd just forgive him. Hours passed. The night shift came on. The same nurse who always seemed to be there smiled at him sympathetically. "Any change?" James asked, even though he knew the answer. "Not yet. But don't give up hope. I've seen patients wake up after months. The brain heals in mysterious ways." James nodded, turned back to Claire, took her hand again, and then, so faintly he almost missed it, her fingers moved. Not a twitch, not a reflex, an actual movement. A squeeze, gentle but deliberate, responding to his touch. James froze. "Claire?" Her eyelids flickered. "Once. Twice. Nurse." James couldn't look away from Claire's face. "Nurse! Something's happening." The nurse rushed in, checked the monitors. Her eyes widened. "Her brain activity is increasing. Get Dr. Patel. Now." Recovery was not a light switch. It was a slow dawn. The first day, Claire's eyes opened for seconds at a time. She recognized nothing. No one. Her gaze unfocused, sliding past James without landing. The second day, she tracked movement, followed the nurse with her eyes, squeezed James's hand when asked, though he couldn't tell if it was conscious or reflex. The third day, she said a word. Just one, water. Her voice was gravel and rust, a sound that barely qualified as speech, but it was hers. The fourth day, he stayed awake for an hour, asked where she was 3 times, each time forgetting the answer within minutes. Dr. Patel explained this was normal. The brain rebooting, loading memories back online one file at a time. The fifth day, she asked about Lily. James had been prepared for this, had rehearsed what to say. But when the moment came, when Claire looked at him with eyes that finally saw him, really saw him, and whispered, "Where's my daughter?" all his preparation evaporated. "She's safe. She's with a foster family. She's okay." Tears slipped down Claire's face. Silent, helpless. "Can I see her? Soon." James gripped her hand. "You need to be stronger first." The doctor said, "I need to see her." Claire's voice was gaining strength with each word. "Please, I need to know she's real. That I didn't dream her." James looked at Dr. Patel, who'd been monitoring from the doorway. The doctor considered, then nodded. "Tomorrow. If you can stay awake for 4 hours today, you can see her tomorrow." Claire stayed awake for 6. The next minutes were a blur of activity. Doctors, nurses, equipment. James was pushed gently aside, told to wait in the hall. He stood outside the door, watching through the window, his heart racing, hope and fear warring in his chest. After what felt like hours but was probably 15 minutes, Dr. Patel emerged. "She's waking up. It's slow and she's not fully conscious yet, but she's definitely coming back." "Can I see her?" "Give us another hour. We need to run some tests, make sure she's stable." "But yes, you can see her." James waited, paced the hallway, called Catherine with the update, his voice shaking. Called the foster home to check on Lily, who was asleep. Paced some more. Finally, Dr. Patel found him. "She's asking for her daughter." James followed him back into the room. Claire's eyes were open now, barely, still heavy with confusion and drugs and the long battle back from darkness. But open, alert, seeing. She looked at him. For a long moment she just stared. Then her lips moved, forming words that came out barely audible. "James," he crossed to her side, took her hand. "I'm here." "Lily. Where's Lily?" "She's safe. She's with a foster family." "She's okay." Tears slipped down Claire's face. "I thought she had to stop, gather strength. I thought she was dead. I thought David killed her." "No, she got away. She saved herself, and I found her." "You?" Claire's eyes focused with obvious effort. "How?" "I was driving past. I saw her in the snow. The rest, it's complicated. But she's alive, Claire. Our daughter is alive." "Our?" The word was barely a whisper. James nodded. Felt his own tears now, couldn't stop them. "I know. I had a DNA test. She's mine. Ours. And I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Sorry for everything." Claire's eyes closed. For a moment, James panicked, thinking she was slipping away again. But then she squeezed his hand, that same gentle pressure. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't run this time." "I won't. I promise, I'm never running again." She smiled then, so faint he almost missed it. Then sleep took her again, but it was different this time. Not the terrible stillness of coma, just rest, natural, healing. James sat beside her as she slept, held her hand, and for the first time in 8 years felt something that might eventually become forgiveness. For Claire, for himself, for all the years they'd lost and the future they might still have. David Carter had been released on bail 2 weeks prior, pending trial for the assault. His lawyer, provided by the police union, had argued successfully that he posed no flight risk, that he was a decorated officer who'd suffered a mental health crisis. The judge had agreed, with conditions, ankle monitor, restraining order, mandatory counseling. Now he sat across the courtroom, looking nothing like the man who'd put Claire in a coma. David Carter had been released 4 days after his arrest. The bail hearing had been brief. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Dunn, provided by the police union, had argued he was a decorated officer with no prior record, that the incident was a mental health crisis, not criminal intent, that he deserved treatment, not imprisonment. The prosecutor had objected, pointed to Claire's coma, to Lily's hypothermia, to the pattern of abuse documented over 3 years. But the judge had sided with the defense. Bail set at $50,000. Conditions: ankle monitor, restraining order, weekly counseling, surrender of firearms. David's fellow officers had pooled money for bail within hours. Since then, he'd attended every counseling session, completed an intensive PTSD program, submitted to psychiatric evaluation. The report had been surprisingly sympathetic. Combat trauma, undiagnosed depression, alcohol dependence. A man who'd fallen through every crack in the system meant to catch him, none of which changed what he'd done. Catherine had shown James the psych report, had watched his face as he read about David's childhood. Abusive father, military service. The shooting that ended his career and shattered whatever stability he'd built. "You need to see him as human," Catherine had said quietly, "not because it excuses anything, but because the judge will. And if you go in there seeing only a monster, you'll lose perspective. You'll seem vindictive instead of protective." So James had tried, had forced himself to read every page, to understand the broken man who'd broken his family. It hadn't made him hate David less. It had just made the hate more complicated. The courtroom smelled of old wood and anxiety. James sat beside Catherine Walsh at the plaintiff's table, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and felt like a fraud. Across the aisle, David Carter sat with his public defender, a young man who looked tired and overworked. David was clean-shaven now, wearing clothes that didn't fit quite right, his hands folded on the table in front of him. He looked nothing like the monster James had imagined. He looked ordinary, broken, human, which somehow made it worse. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Eleanor Hartwick, entered. Everyone stood. The bailiff called the court to order. The machinery of justice ground slowly into motion. Catherine stood first, presented their case with the precision of a surgeon, the DNA test proving James's paternity, Claire's statement, given the day before from her hospital bed, confirming that James was Lily's biological father, evidence of David Carter's abuse, police reports, medical records, photographs that made several people in the courtroom look away. David's lawyer countered, argued that James was an absentee parent trying to claim a child he'd never met, that Lily knew David as her father, that 6 years of raising a child couldn't be dismissed because of biology, that David had made mistakes, yes, but he was getting help, attending anger management, committed to change. James listened to it all with mounting rage. Mistakes, as if beating your wife into a coma was equivalent to forgetting an anniversary, as if terrorizing a 6-year-old child was just an error in judgment. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Witnesses were called. A social worker testified about the foster placement. A police officer described the scene they'd found at Claire's apartment. Blood on the stairs, a broken phone, signs of struggle. Through it all, David sat motionless, never looked at James, never changed expression. Finally, Judge Hartwick called a recess. Told them she'd have a decision within the hour. James stood on shaking legs, followed Catherine into the hallway. "How do you think it went?" he asked. Catherine's expression was carefully neutral. "Hard to say. The DNA test is compelling. But judges don't like disrupting established relationships, even dysfunctional ones. He put her mother in a coma. I know, and that matters. But the law moves slowly, James, even when it shouldn't. The hours stretched into 90 minutes. James paced, checked his phone obsessively, called the hospital twice to check on Claire, who was still weak but improving, called the foster home to talk to Lily, who asked when she could come home. Soon, he'd promised. Very soon. Finally, the bailiff called them back in. Everyone returned to their seats. Judge Hartwick emerged from her chambers, expression unreadable. I've reviewed all the evidence, she began. Her voice was measured, professional. This is not an easy decision. On one hand, we have biological paternity. On the other, an established parental relationship spanning 6 years. James felt his stomach drop. However, she continued, we also have clear evidence of domestic violence, abuse that endangered both the mother and child. Whatever David Carter's intentions were, whatever his struggles with mental health, the facts are incontrovertible. He created an unsafe environment. He put a 6-year-old child in mortal danger. David's head dropped. Therefore, Judge Hartwick looked directly at James. I'm granting temporary custody to James Morgan, with the understanding that this arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. David Carter's parental rights are suspended pending completion of a court-mandated rehabilitation program. He will be allowed supervised visitation only after completing said program and undergoing psychiatric evaluation. The gavel came down. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. James couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Catherine was saying something, congratulations maybe, but the words didn't register. All he could think was that he'd won. Lily was his. He could protect her now, keep her safe. David stood up. For the first time, he looked at James directly. His eyes were red-rimmed, hollow. Take care of her, he said quietly. She deserves better than I could give. Then he was gone, led away by his lawyer, disappearing through a side door. James drove straight to the foster home. Ellen Reeves met him at the door, smiling. I heard. She's upstairs packing. Packing? The words sounded surreal. Lily had been here less than a week and she was already leaving, moving into his life, becoming his responsibility in ways he still couldn't fully comprehend. He found her in her room, carefully folding clothes into a small suitcase. She looked up when he entered, eyes wide with hope and fear. Did you win? Can I come home? Yes. James knelt down so they were eye level. You're coming home with me. Today. Lily threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The word Daddy still felt strange on his tongue, in his ears, but also right, more right than anything had felt in years. They drove to his penthouse in the Porsche. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the city slide past. Is your house really big? She asked. Pretty big. Do you have a dog? No. Should we get one? Lily's face lit up. Really? Can we? James found himself smiling. We'll see. The penthouse felt different with Lily in it. Her presence filled the space in ways furniture and art never could. She explored with wide eyes, touching things carefully, as if afraid they might break. This is where you live? All by yourself? It was. James set her suitcase down, but not anymore. He showed her the guest room he'd hastily converted into a child's space. New bedding with stars on it. A bookshelf filled with books he'd ordered online, unsure what 6-year-olds read. Stuffed animals arranged on the bed. It looked like something from a catalog. Sterile. Perfect. Nothing like a real child's room. Lily stood in the doorway, taking it all in. It's beautiful. You can change anything you want. Paint the walls, move furniture, make it yours. She nodded, then asked quietly, when can I see Mommy? Tomorrow. The doctor said she can have visitors now. She's getting stronger every day. Lily seemed satisfied with this. She sat on the bed, bouncing slightly to test it. Can I draw pictures on the walls? James thought about his expensive paint job, the designer who'd carefully selected every shade. Yes, even if they're messy, especially if they're messy, Lily smiled. The first real, uncomplicated smile he'd seen from her. Okay, I think I'm going to like it here. That first night was awkward. James made pasta, one of the 5 things he could cook without burning. Lily ate quietly, answering his questions in monosyllables. After dinner, she asked if she could take a bath. Of course. There's a bathroom attached to your room, towels in the closet. She disappeared. James cleaned up, loaded the dishwasher, and tried not to panic about the reality of what he'd just taken on. He was responsible for another human being now. A small, traumatized human being who needed things he wasn't sure he could provide. Stability, safety, love. He could do stability. He could definitely provide safety. Love, that one was trickier. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he'd spent so long building walls that the architecture of affection felt foreign. Lily emerged in pajamas, hair damp, looking impossibly small. "Can you read me a story?" she asked. "Mommy always reads to me before bed." James found one of the books he'd bought, a story about a girl and a dragon and a friendship that saved a kingdom. He read it carefully, using different voices for different characters, feeling ridiculous and somehow necessary. When he finished, Lily was already half asleep. "Daddy," she murmured, "will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Always." He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her small chest rise and fall, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a blanket. Heavy but not unwelcome. This was his daughter. His to protect. His to raise. His to love. He'd missed 6 years. He couldn't get them back. But he had now. He had every day going forward, and he would not waste them. The next morning they went to the hospital. Lily was nervous in the elevator, holding James's hand so tightly it almost hurt. "What if Mommy doesn't recognize me?" she asked. "She'll recognize you. You're her whole world." Claire was sitting up in bed when they entered. Her face was still pale, still bearing the yellow-green shadows of healing bruises. But her eyes were clear, alert. And when she saw Lily, they filled with tears. "Baby," her voice was stronger than yesterday. "Oh, my baby girl." Lily ran to her, climbed carefully onto the bed, buried her face in Claire's shoulder. Both of them were crying now, holding each other like they could merge into one person if they just held tight enough. James stood by the door, suddenly feeling like an intruder. This moment wasn't his. This was theirs. Mother and daughter, reunited after trauma that should have killed them both. But then Claire looked up at him, reached out one hand. "Come here." He approached slowly, stood beside the bed, uncertain. "Thank you," Claire said quietly, "for finding her, for keeping her safe, for everything. I should have been there sooner. 8 years sooner." Claire shook her head. "We can't change the past, James. We can only decide what we do with the time we have left." Lily looked between them, sensing the weight of things unspoken. "Are you and Daddy going to be together now? Like a real family?" James and Claire exchanged glances. So much to unpack in that question. So much history and hurt and hope. "We're figuring that out," Claire said carefully. "But yes, we're a family, the three of us, no matter what that looks like." Over the next 2 weeks, a routine emerged. Mornings at the penthouse with Lily, teaching her to make pancakes, which they burned more often than not. Walking her to the small private school James had enrolled her in. Watching her disappear through doors that led to friendships and learning and normalcy. Afternoons at the hospital with Claire. Bringing her updates about Lily, about the world outside her room. Watching her grow stronger, more herself. Sometimes they talked about the past. More often they talked about the future. What came next? Where they went from here. "I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago," Claire said one afternoon. "I've been through things, James. Things that changed me." "I know. And I can't just—" She paused, searching for words. "I can't just pick up where we left off. Like nothing happened. Like you didn't leave me. Like I didn't spend years learning to survive without you." "I'm not asking you to." James sat in the chair that had become his, in the room that felt more familiar than his own bedroom. "I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm different too. That I learned something from being an idiot." Claire smiled slightly. "What did you learn?" "That running away doesn't make you safe, it just makes you alone." She considered this, nodded. "Okay, we'll take it slow." Slow was good. Slow meant time to build trust, time for wounds to heal, time for Lily to adjust to having a father who wasn't violent, a mother who was recovering, a life that didn't revolve around fear. But slow was also hard, because James could see the woman he'd loved buried beneath the trauma, could see glimpses of who Claire had been, who she was becoming. And he wanted to reach for her, hold her, promise her things he wasn't sure he could deliver. Instead, he waited, brought her books she'd mentioned liking, sat with her during physical therapy, listened when she wanted to talk, and provided silence when she didn't. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Claire was discharged. She moved into James's penthouse with the awkwardness of someone who didn't quite know where she fit. James gave her the master bedroom, took the smaller guest room for himself. Lily was delighted to have her mother home, following her from room to room, afraid to let her out of sight. They ate dinner together that first night, pizza, because nobody had the energy to cook. Lily chatted about school, about her new friend Maya, about the art project she was working on. James and Claire contributed when appropriate, but mostly they just watched their daughter, alive and thriving despite everything. After Lily went to bed, James and Claire sat in the living room. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows. The silence between them was comfortable now, familiar. "This is strange," Claire said finally. "Being here with you, good strange or bad strange? I'm not sure yet." She looked at him. "You've changed. You're," she searched for the word, "softer." "Is that bad?" "No, just different. The James I knew was all sharp edges, like you were defending yourself against the world." "I was." James leaned back against the couch. "Turns out the world wasn't the problem." "What was?" Mitshai, my fear, my father's voice in my head telling me that love was weakness, that needing people made you vulnerable. And now? Now I know that being alone is the real weakness, that needing people is what makes us human. Claire smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "When I almost lost everything that mattered." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Claire stood, yawned. "I should sleep." "The doctor said rest is important." "Of course." James stood as well. "Good night, Claire." She paused halfway to the bedroom. Turned back. "James, yes, thank you. For all of this, for Lily, for me, for not giving up. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You raised her alone. You kept her safe for 6 years. You're the hero in this story, not me." Claire's eyes glistened. "Maybe we're both just people trying to do better." "Yeah," James smiled. "Maybe we are." A month after Claire came home, David Carter's lawyer called Catherine. David wanted to see Lily, supervised visitation as permitted by the court order. He'd completed the first part of his rehabilitation program. The psychiatric evaluation was pending, but preliminary results were positive. James's first instinct was to refuse, to protect Lily from any reminder of the man who had hurt her, who'd nearly destroyed her family. But Catherine was firm. "He has legal rights, even suspended ones. And honestly, James, if we deny him reasonable visitation, it could hurt us when the case comes up for review." So James had to tell Lily that David wanted to see her, had to watch her small face go through complicated emotions. Fear, definitely, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the remnants of whatever bond she'd formed with the man she'd known as her father for 6 years. "I don't have to go, right?" Lily had asked. "You won't make me?" "No one will make you, but if you want to see him, if you want closure or answers, or just to know he's okay, that's allowed too." Lily thought about this for a long time. Finally, she said, "I think I want to go, just once, to tell him I'm okay." The visitation took place at a family services center, a neutral space designed for exactly this purpose. James and Claire both went, sitting in a waiting room while Lily met with David in a supervised room down the hall. The hour felt endless. Claire twisted her hands together nervously. James paced. They'd been assured that trained professionals were monitoring every second, that Lily could leave at any time, that she was completely safe. But logic didn't erase anxiety. Finally, the door opened. Lily emerged, her face unreadable. She walked straight to Claire, buried her face in her mother's shirt. "Are you okay, baby?" Claire stroked her hair. "What happened? I told him I was happy now." Lily's voice was muffled. "I told him I have a real daddy who doesn't get angry, and I told him I forgive him, but I don't want to be his daughter anymore." Claire looked at James over Lily's head. Her expression was complicated. Proud, sad, relieved. "What did he say?" James asked gently. Lily pulled back, wiped her eyes. "He said he was sorry, and that he understood, and that he hopes someday I'll have good memories of him too, not just bad ones." "Do you have good memories?" "Some." Lily's voice was small. "He used to read me stories, before he got sick, before he started hurting Mommy." James knelt down so he was eye level with her. It's okay to have complicated feelings about him, ma'am. He hurt you and your mommy, and that was wrong. But he was still part of your life. You're allowed to remember the good parts without forgetting the bad parts. Lily nodded, seemed to absorb this. Then she asked, "Can we go home now?" 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Legal size, David's lawyer's return address. James opened it alone in his study. Inside, two documents. The first was the signed termination of parental rights. Notarized, final. The legal language cold and absolute. David Carter hereby relinquishes all parental rights, privileges, and responsibilities. The second was a letter, handwritten, the penmanship shaky. To Lily, I don't expect you to read this now. Maybe not ever. Your dad, your real dad, will decide when you're ready. If you're ever ready, I want you to know I'm sorry. Sorry for hurting your mom. Sorry for scaring you. Sorry for being the kind of man who made you run into a snowstorm because staying was more dangerous. I loved you the best I could, but my best wasn't good enough. Wasn't safe. Your mom tried to tell me that. I didn't listen until it was too late. Your real dad will give you what I couldn't. A home without fear, a life without walking on eggshells. That's what you deserve. What you always deserved. I'm getting help. Real help. It won't change what I did, but maybe it'll mean I never do it to anyone else. Be happy, Lily. That's all I want for you now. The letter wasn't signed. James read it 3 times, tried to find manipulation in it, some hidden agenda, some last attempt to maintain control. But all he found was surrender, the kind that comes when a man finally sees himself clearly and doesn't like what he finds. He filed the letter with the adoption papers. Someday Lily could decide what to do with it. For now, it was just another piece of the past. Acknowledged, archived, no longer active. Yeah, James stood, took her hand. Let's go home. They didn't see David again after that. He completed his rehabilitation program, but he didn't ask for more visitation. Through his lawyer, he agreed to sign away his parental rights, made it official, made James's adoption of Lily straightforward, uncontested. 6 months after that snowy night when everything changed, James and Claire sat in a lawyer's office while paperwork was signed and notarized. Lily Bennett became Lily Morgan, officially, legally, permanently. Lily was at school when it happened. She didn't need to be there for the paperwork. But when she came home that afternoon, James and Claire were waiting with a cake. "What's this for?" Lily asked, dropping her backpack. "To celebrate." Claire's smile was radiant. "You have a new last name." "Really? I'm a Morgan now?" "Really, truly." Lily looked at the cake, at her parents, at the apartment that had somehow become home. Cool. That was it. No dramatics, no tears, just cool. Because at 6 years old, what mattered wasn't the name on legal documents. What mattered was that she had a mother who was healing, a father who showed up every day, and a home where violence was a memory instead of a threat. Life settled into rhythms. School and work and homework and dinners together. Movie nights where they let Lily pick, even though her taste ran toward animated films about talking animals. Weekends at the park, teaching Lily to ride a bike, watching her make friends with other children who didn't know what she'd survived. James and Claire navigated their relationship with caution. They were co-parents first, friends mostly, sometimes more than friends, in the quiet moments after Lily was asleep, when they'd sit close on the couch and their hands would touch and neither would pull away. 8 months after the custody hearing, Claire opened her own art studio. Small, but hers. James helped with the lease, the supplies, the business plan. But it was Claire's vision, her art, her dream finally realized. The opening night was small, just friends and a few local artists. Lily helped hang paintings, arrange flowers, greeted guests with practiced charm. James stood in a corner watching Claire talk about her work and felt pride so profound it made his chest ache. This was his family, messy and complicated and born from trauma, but family nonetheless. Near the end of the night, Claire found him. "You're lurking, observing. Come look at something." She took his hand, led him to a painting he hadn't seen before. It was different from her other work, darker, more abstract, but unmistakable in its subject, a man holding a small figure against falling snow. The brushstrokes suggested motion, urgency, desperation, but also hope. The colors were cold, except for one spot, right where the man's arms wrapped around the child. There, the paint was warm, red and orange and gold. When did you paint this? James's voice was rough. Last month. I call it the finding. Claire looked at the painting, not at him. It's about the moment everything changed, the moment you stopped running. I like that moment. Me too. Claire turned to him, smiled. I like what came after even more. James wanted to kiss her then, wanted it with an intensity that surprised him. But Lily was across the room and this moment felt too fragile, too perfect to rush. So instead he just squeezed Claire's faces and said thank you. For what? For giving me a second chance, for letting me prove I'm different, for being brave when I was a coward. Claire's eyes filled. We were both a little broken, James. We just needed time to heal. Are we healed? Getting there. She smiled through tears. Definitely getting there. 1 year after the finding, James woke early, made pancakes without burning them, which felt like a victory, brought Claire coffee in bed, which was becoming a Sunday tradition, woke Lily with tickles, which was another tradition, one that filled the penthouse with laughter. They had plans today, the three of them, a trip to the lake, weather permitting, a picnic, normalcy disguised as celebration. But first, James had something to do. He found Claire in the kitchen, helping Lily with her shoes. Lily, can you give your mom and me a minute? Lily looked between them, then grinned. Are you going to kiss? You should. Maya's parents kiss all the time. Out. James pointed toward her room. 5 minutes. Lily giggled, disappeared. James turned to Claire, who was watching him with amused curiosity. What's this about? He took her hand, led her to the windows overlooking the city, the same windows where he'd stood alone for so many years, watching life happen to other people. A year ago, I found our daughter in the snow, found you in that hospital bed, found out I'd wasted 8 years being afraid of the best thing that ever happened to me. Claire's expression softened. James, let me finish. He took a breath. I'm not good at this, at feelings, at words. But I need you to know that this year, with you and Lily, has been the best year of my life. Not because it was easy, it wasn't, but because it was real. Because I got to be a father. Because I got to watch you become yourself again. Because I got to fall in love with you all over again, slowly, the right way this time. Where are you going with this? He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside, a simple ring. Sapphire, the color of Lily's eyes. Claire's eyes, the color of water and sky and second chances. I'm saying marry me. Not because we have a child together, not because it's practical, but because I love you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Because I'm done running and I want to build something permanent. With you, with Lily, with whatever comes next. Claire stared at the ring, at him. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, she said, then laughed. Yes, you idiot. Of course, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her, finally, properly, the way he'd wanted to for months. She kissed him back, tasting of coffee and tears and hope. Lily's voice interrupted them. Are you kissing? I knew it. They broke apart, laughing. Lily stood in the doorway, grinning triumphantly. Come here, Claire said. We have something to tell you. Lily approached, eyes wide. What? Your daddy just asked me to marry him. And she said yes, James added. So we're going to be a real family? Lily's voice was small, uncertain, as if she didn't dare hope too much. We already are a real family. Claire pulled her close. This just makes it official. Lily threw her arms around both of them. Best day ever. They went to the lake as planned, spread a blanket on the grass, ate sandwiches, watched clouds drift past. Lily ran down to the water's edge, collecting stones and feathers and treasures only a child could see. James and Claire sat close, her hand in his, the ring catching sunlight. I never thought we'd end up here, Claire said quietly. After everything. Neither did I. Are you scared? Terrified, James smiled. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something matters. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. We're going to be okay. Yeah. James watched Lily splash in the shallow water, her laughter carrying across the space. We really are. The wedding happened 3 months later. Small, simple, just family and close friends. Lily was the flower girl, taking her job seriously, scattering petals with concentrated precision. James and Claire wrote their own vows, promised things that mattered, presence instead of perfection, honesty instead of ease, showing up every day, even when it was hard. When they kissed, Lily cheered. When they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, James felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace with noise. That night, after Lily was asleep, James and Claire stood on the balcony of their hotel room. The city sparkled below. The same city where everything had fallen apart and somehow come back together. No regrets? Claire asked. Only the years I wasted. She leaned into him. We can't get those back. No. But we have now. And tomorrow? And every day after that. Claire smiled. That's enough. Yeah. James wrapped his arms around his wife, thought about his daughter sleeping in the next room, thought about the life they'd built from the wreckage of the past. It really is. The city below continued its endless motion. People lived and loved and lost and found again. The same patterns repeating, the same stories told in infinite variations. But this story, their story, felt singular, felt earned, felt like something worth all the pain it took to reach it. James Morgan had spent years running from himself, running from love, running from the vulnerability that came with needing someone else. He'd stopped running the night he found a small girl in the snow, stopped, knelt down, opened his heart despite every instinct telling him to protect it. And in doing so, he'd found not just his daughter, not just the woman he loved, he'd found himself, the real version. The one who'd been hiding all along beneath the wealth and the walls and the carefully constructed loneliness. And that man, the one he'd always been meant to be, was finally home.